I'm Fr.John Powers, and welcome to I'm sorry to say, our final segment in my series of interviews with Father Basil Pennington, Trappist monk, author of a number of books. Before we get into our continuing discussion on centering prayer and prayer forms, maybe we can talk a little bit about your books again, briefly. Your most recent book.
Well, the most recent book I published is on the Mass. And it was really a book which I wrote for my own benefit. You know, there are three kinds of sacred reading a person needs in their life. First, they need what I would call sacred study to inform the mind, to really understand scriptures and revelation, the mystery. Then we need motivational reading, which helps to make these things come alive for us. And then we need the Lectio, which we talked about before, which is opening us out to the experience of God. Well, that motivational reading, besides general motivation, you know, we need help at times to have one or another particular facet come alive. You know, when you go to Mass every day, you know, sometimes it begins to get a little routine, or you feel it isn't meaning all at once. And so I looked around for a good book in the Mass, and I couldn't find one. So I said, I'll write one. So what I did is I took each part of the Mass and looked back into the tradition a little bit to see what it really meant, and then try to come up with ideas, the ways we could express that today. So it's a very practical book, but a beautiful book, I think.
Written for who specifically? A general audience?
Written for everybody, yeah. In fact, the first fan letter I got on it was from a Jewish rabbi, so figure that one out. I hadn't given by exactly, but I talked about the Jewish roots of the Mass, and he found it fascinating. He wants to come and talk about it more. So it's for anybody who wants the Mass to mean more, but I think it'll be especially helpful to parish liturgical groups who are responsible for developing the liturgy in their parish and things like that, you know. But as I say, I wrote it primarily, you know, just to help my own response to the Mass to be more lively, and I enjoyed it.
Well, just you mentioned the example of that, the rabbi being, you know, surprised by the historical roots of the Mass. We've been talking in this series about the traditional forms of prayer, the Rosary and Benediction, how younger people today are surprised that these are part of our tradition.
Yeah.
And there is some sense of lacking a knowledge about our history as a community.
Right.
Our history as a prayer community. And even the history of the changes in our Catholic community.
Yes.
We don't know that things have not always been as we do them now.
Yeah, and that was fascinating for me in this book on the Mass, you know, look back and see the roots and go through that tradition all the way back to the Jewish times, but through this Christian centuries and all. And I think that's something, you know, that could really make good homilies if the priests would bring the people into the richness of their tradition. The Catholic tradition is tremendously rich and beautiful.
There was a recent survey done by a priest. He asked the high school students and the junior high school students to respond, the Catholic Church is blank. And a very large percentage filled out that sentence with, the Catholic Church is always changing.
Really?
Now, our tradition, I mean, our age group would not necessarily agree with that.
Yes.
We would not have filled that in that way. But for
years
younger,
ago, we would have said the Catholic Church is static, stable, solid.
But for younger people today, after Vatican II, that experience of a rapid change. So you're talking about in this, when we're talking about centering prayer, is rediscovering what has always been.
Right, yes, very definitely. You know, if you've read any of Dostoevsky's novels, they have that image of the starets, the lay monk who's out on the roads, and while he talks to people about their turkeys and pigs, he also teaches them the Jesus prayer. Well, we had that in the West very much, up to the time of the Reformation, when you had monasteries all over Western Europe. You'd have lay brothers, many lay brothers in monastery, and while they were out working in the fields or at the fairs, or even, you know, the wool trade was much lay brothers, they would be talking to people and teaching them this simple way of prayer. And it's something that kind of got lost. And in 1972, Pope Paul VI asked our abbot, he asked if we would do whatever we could to help the Church refine this tradition. And that's how we got started in the centering prayer, teaching it at first in our guest house, and then we were invited by the religious superiors to teach it to the religious. And now, of course, the many religious and lay people teaching it all over the country, and indeed all over the world.
To be teachers of prayer, this is it would seem to me to be the primary responsibility of one who is religious or clergy or minister in the
Or
church.
parent too.
Right.
I mean, what's more important in the education they're calling forth their children than to help them get in touch with God, their Father, and the great love and care that's there.
We were talking about centering prayer and some of the obstacles. Perhaps we can talk about some of benefits. I don't know if that's quite the word. Benefits.
The fruits.
The payoff.
Yeah.
What are the some of the positive results that takes place in a person's life?
Well, certainly, if you practice the prayer regularly, and we encourage people when they are practicing prayer to try to get 2 periods a day if possible. The morning's good after you get up, you freshen up and so on, to spend 15 minutes just sitting quietly. And then the evening, maybe before supper, when you wash up and so on, relax a little bit. Now, it takes some kind of ingenuity sometimes to fit that into life and family life and so on, but it's amazing, it's interesting to hear how people do that. But when you do that, you begin, first of all, to realize how much noise there is in your life. And you begin to let that go. And then you find that all your life begins to be a little more spacious. You're more present to people and things and enjoy them more. Other people notice how much more respectful you're becoming in a way of people and things. And you don't get excited and you don't react, but rather you're coming out of your own center and being to things. And so there's a lot more peace in your life. And you bring peace to other people's lives. And then there's a lot more joy because you come to know how much God loves you. Just making that space and letting God show up in his loving care,
What do you say to those men and women, and you mentioned the family situation sometimes, the housewife, the woman who is at home taking care of the children, who is up to beyond here with workload, just trying to keep things together during the day, to find 2 15-minute periods of time in a place where there is some even relative quiet can be extraordinarily difficult.
It is, but it's surprising the stories you get from mothers, how they're able to bring their family into this, even little children, and how holding a child in their arms while they're centering, the child will calm down and really just be quiet and content. And little ones will sit. One mother told me about her 3-year-old after her 5 older children and husband leave for school and work, and they center while she's fixing breakfast in this particular family. She and her 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old runs to his chair and he sits down and they meditate together 15-20 minutes and then they play a bit. But she said, talking to her child, she is sure that child is having beautiful experiences of God as Father. So just kind of opening the space and working with it. And people tell me even the pets quiet down. So I don't know. But the atmosphere becomes that way that you can understand how that could happen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
And then one man told me, when I told him the prayer, he said, my 7-ring circus, it's impossible. I said, well, if you really want to, you can, Joe. So he came back to me a couple months later and he said, it worked out. He went into the office early and got his first 20 minutes at his desk before he started to work. He said what he did in the evening, he said when he came home from work, he always went in to wash up. So what he did, he went in to wash up, and then he sat in the tub and meditated for 20 minutes. And nobody noticed he was taking longer to wash up. But he said he made a big mistake, because after he'd been doing it about 2 months, one night his wife said to him, he said, Joe, I don't know what's come over you. You're so joyful and peaceful in the evening. What's going on? So Joe said he made this big mistake. He told her what he was doing. And she said, well, if you can meditate 20 minutes before supper, I can meditate 20 minutes before supper. After you get out of that tub, you can finish supper while I meditate. So they take turns. So things can be worked out. We do make time for sleep. We do make time for meals. We do make time for, reading the newspaper or those things which we decide we want to do. And if we really want to make time to be refreshed by God and to be with God, we can make time.
We are oftentimes a society of results, so a lot of people will not do something or get involved in something unless there is some positive result. Now, perhaps that isn't the best motivation for getting involved in centering prayer, but there are this sense of peace, joy, and this quieter sense of life.
But see, the tricky thing here, in a way, is You know, if you're going into it for peace or these things, you're not going to get it because you're still seeking yourself.
Okay.
You know, it's only when you begin to seek God, and you'll only know by experience.
So these are byproducts.
Yeah, they're byproducts,
Of a greater experience.
Yeah. If you're seeking anything else, then you're still seeking self. And but you'll only know it by experience. And that's why when we've taught people the prayer, we say, you know, try it for 30 days. Be faithful to it. And give God a chance.
So you can't go to centering prayer for results. You can only go to it for itself.
For God. I mean, that's what prayer is. You're reaching out to God in love. You know, and you know, the person is going around trying to fall in love. It don't work. You know. Or I compare it sometimes to contemplative prayer with sleep. You know, you try to get to sleep, don't work. But you let go and let it happen, it does happen.
Right.
And so the prayer, you open the space just for God. And all right, suppose he just leaves you sitting there for 20 minutes and nothing happens. How many times have you left him sitting around waiting for you? You know? But you have to open that space. In the book of Revelations, the last book of the scriptures, there's that beautiful scene where our Lord says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if one opens, I will come in and sit down side by side with him and sup with him." It's a beautiful, intimate, you know, two dear ones. And not just across the table, side by side so we can rest our head. But the key is, behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if one opens. And that's what we're doing in centering prayer. We're opening the door and saying, "Come in, Lord." See, God made us. And he knows the greatest thing about us is our freedom, because therein lies our power of love. And he will never force his way into our lives.
But I sense God certainly will not force his way, but there is a seductive power of God, a seductive type of love in the beauty of people, in the beauty of creation, in the beauty of someone giving of themselves when, for all practical purposes, their giving is beyond every human measure. The beauty of just a beautiful smile.
Yeah.
The beauty of a person who can struggle with suffering that's unbelievable at times, or even at war, how people can deal with such deprivation and hurt. That there's a seductive love through all of that that doesn't force, but entices us to open the door. To allow God to come in. And this is almost, you experience this type of seduction through people who have experienced the peace you're talking about and who almost have allowed it their vocation to be peacemakers in their home, in their community, in their families, in the world.
Right.
And it would seem to me that someone who does centering prayer would become this type of person in the world.
Yeah, that's, you know, especially we have been called to be one with Christ through baptism, and then called even to a greater oneness with him through consecration of vows and so on. We must be the people who really live out of that and are ready when others see that in it and say, you know, show me the way to teach. And that's where something like centering prayer is a great help. That's one of the things, see, that struck me is how many of these Eastern masters came over in the 60s, if a young person went to them, immediately they would say, well, do this, 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 and this. And they could go home and start doing this, this, and this, and be meditating and really praying sometimes, really seeking God, but sometimes not knowing what they were doing, but doing it. See? And that's where we weren't responding to people's needs. Someone came to us and said, teach me how to pray, and you gave them a book or something, you know, or made it so complicated, or years processes or something, you know. And what we try to do in the centering prayer is say, here's a simple thing that you can do. You know, twice a day you can sit down for 20 minutes, you just get comfortable, close your eyes, and then just turn to God in you and just be with him, repeating his name, your favorite name for him as often as you need to, just to be with him. And immediately God would respond, you know. And their life would begin to open out to new dimensions. We gave them something concrete and practical. And it makes that framework within which God can do whatever he wants then. And so it's a deep personal relationship, and everybody's going to have different experiences in there, but that doesn't matter. You're not going there for the experiences. You're going there for God. You and God are together, and that's the only thing that matters.
Well, what is the difficult part of this? You're talking about it as simply As you
The
can.
difficult part is we go with our false expectations. I think God should show up this way, God should act that way, I should have this experience. Or I'm not really seeking God, I'm seeking my own peace and my own satisfaction, or be able to pat myself in the back and saying, hey, I'm a real prayer now, and all that, you know, rubbish. That's the difficult part. All our self, the false self, getting in the way. False expectations and so on. Instead of just simply opening a space for God to show up.
But what of intercessory prayer? You and I both receive, I'm sure, I know I do, many requests, letters every day from people who listen or watch our programs, asking me, Father, please pray for my mother who's sick, my son who's a non-believer, or stop going to church, or pray because I'm going into the hospital tomorrow. How does this intercessory type of prayer, and sometimes people desperately seeking a response from God and not feeling that God answers their prayer.
Yeah.
How does this fit in with centering prayer?
Well, first of all, you know, our Lord has said to us, and St. Paul has repeated it, we're to pray always. Huh? So centering prayer is just one or two special periods of our day. It's like a deeply loving married couple. They're really to each other all the time, thinking of each other, working for each other, talking to each other. There has to be times to let everything else go and just embrace each other in love. See? And the center is kind of that. It's the time where everything else go and just embrace. But the rest of the time we're living with God. And so all day long we're going to be turning to God, you know, every time we meet these needs, or our own needs, and say, Lord, help me. Lord, take care of this. Lord. And because the experience we've had in centering, we're going to be so much more aware of His presence and so much more aware of His loving care and power that those prayers are going to be more vital than ever before. But there's something more here. See, God gives us whatever we want. Not what we say we want, but what we really want. See, if you ask me to pray for something and I rattle off some prayers, I don't think too much is going to happen. But if I take your concern and put it deep in my heart, when I go to centering, the Lord is going to see it there. And He's going to take care of it. You know, at the monastery sometimes we talk about, you know, how wonderfully God takes care of our families. The wonderful things He does for our loved ones. And it's not that we're praying for them explicitly a lot, but they're deep in our hearts, and He sees them there all the time. He takes care of them. And, you know, I think we have hints of this in the Scriptures. The two great prayers in the New Testament, the one who got Christ's first miracle, the one who got His greatest miracle, the two Marys, His mother and Mary, the sister of Lazarus, when they prayed, they didn't ask for anything. They had to articulate their needs so that we could hear it, so to speak. But they just simply said, you know, there is no wine. He who you love is sick. See, their concern was there, and He took care of it. See? So it isn't important for us, for God's sake, to be articulating. For our own need, we do at times need to, really. Yeah. So, but when we go to the center there, He sees the deep concerns of our heart, and He takes care of them wonderfully. Because as we love Him, and all His concerns become ours, He in His love takes on all our concerns and make them His.
What if those who feel that God somehow is not responding to their needs or petitions or prayers?
Well, God said all the way back in Isaiah, you know, my thoughts not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways. But as high as heaven is above the earth, so my ways beyond your ways and my thoughts beyond your thoughts. I think we have to be humble enough to know that we really don't know what's best for us or the best way for things to work out. You know, I think of I was at my brother's house having dinner once, and the little 3-year-old was crying his heart out because he wanted to play with the big shiny carving knife. Right? Now, it was obviously love that was saying to him, don't you touch that.
Right.
But he couldn't see it at that point. He'll see it later. And that's the way we are at times. You know, we're really seeking something good. We think this is the way to get it, our happiness or the good results. And God is saying, no, it doesn't work that way.
It's that false self again in terms of words we've been using, like competitiveness, power, a false sense of power, and control, almost trying to control the way God comes to us and control when we want God to come to us
the way
and
we're going to be happy.
What God is going to do for us when He does come to us.
Right,
that expectation we have of God to respond to us rather than...
And even of ourselves, too. You know, our greatest sin is we expect too little of ourselves because we expect too little of God. You know, we truncate ourselves so constantly because we confine our hopes and our ambitions and our expectations by our own puny little false self, instead of opening out to this divine self that we are, which is unlimited in what we can do and be.
This is a much more creative way of living, and I've tried in a lot of the programs that we've done, over the past to entice people into a much more creative way of living their own lives, that they have the power of choice.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not over everything, and maybe not over the instinctual habits or functions of our lives at times, but certainly a lot more choice in terms of how we're going to pray, how we're going to experience other people, how we're going to even experience and approach ourselves. That we can choose some of this. We don't have to go by rote.
And we can choose to be happy and to live a very full life. Or we can choose to be miserable and look at the dark side of things and always see the half-empty glass instead of the half-full glass.
What changed? You described yourself as at one time being a very tense man, and now being able to enjoy yourself and your own life. What was it in there that helped you change?
Well, I used to think it all depended on me, and I had all this burden of trying to use my gifts and talents and trying to make myself into something and all that sort of stuff. Well, that's an immense burden. And then discovering, that I am God's beloved son, that I, share in the divine life and love. I am magnificent already. And all I have to do is be, and then let him work through my life. And the results have been, I think, just a lot. I'm very happy. I'm sure my sin has gotten in the way, and I've failed in many ways, and all that doesn't bother God either. He took care of all my sin already on the cross.
Okay, now there's another sticking point. I think a lot of people don't see it that way. The sin does stick in God's mind, is much clearer in God's mind than my gifts and talents and happiness.
Now, his son took care of all the sin, and if the gifts and talents, he's constantly bringing forth his creative love, but the sin is just an absence of something, and that's all taken care of. We just turn it over to the Lord and let him be glorified in taking care of it.
And the Lord is taking care of it for yourself and your community members.
For everyone.
How has this centering prayer affected your Trappist community?
Well, I think it has helped the community in a number of ways. One is that the young men coming to us, as candidates or aspirants to life, have been able to learn a simple way of entering into contemplative prayer, and therefore felt immediately fully part of the community as a contemplative community. And of course, they were much more joyful and peaceful too. And so the spirit of the community has just expanded in unity and in depth and in joy. And recently we had the general chapter of our order, and these abbots and abbesses from all over the world came to visit our community. And they were so impressed by the amount of vitality and joy there. And it's because of this, everybody in the community is practicing contemplative prayer regularly and coming out of that joy. This also enabled us, I think, to serve our guests better. One of the things we realized was that inviting and welcoming guests to the monastery, we were sharing some of our silence and solitude, we could offer them good books and counsel, but we weren't practically teaching them the way to share what was at the heart of our life. And once we decided, to teach contemplative prayer in a simple way, we were able to do that. Certainly another effect is that the community has become known for that, and I think it's one of the reasons why we have so many young men applying to enter us. And it's been a great joy to know, too, that we've been able to help other communities, and this has reached around the world. So that it's given the community, I think, a deeper and fuller sense of itself, its identity as a contemplative community, and its role in the heart of the church, in the praying life of the church.
Where is centering prayer going in terms of its development? Do you have any special projects concerning centering prayer in the future that will help to integrate it with other?
Well, our main thing is, I think, to encourage lay people and active religious more and more, not only to practice it, but to teach it and to continue through workshops, I do one national workshop a year. Last year we had about 800 people take part. Training people to, or encouraging really more, to go on and share it. And then publications, books and tapes and so on. The books are being translated to other languages. We're encouraging people in other languages. Most recent, I guess, is Korean. And
Right.
couldn't check the galleys myself.
No.
And
you do have a number of marvelous books. I'll mention a few of the titles again. Certainly, Centering Prayer, Daily We Touch Him, Called. A few others.
Place Apart is kind of an overflow of the centering prayer, and that's where it's gone somewhat too. People having learned this prayer, they want to draw other things from the monastic life. And in A Place Apart, again, we talk about things that are in our life, like the solitude, the time for solitude, the obedience, the spirit of obedience, fasting, work, friendship, and so on, and what they mean in our life and how we practice them, and then suggest practical ways in which lay people can integrate them into their lives.
Well, we only have about a minute and a half left, and there's a delightful story at the end of your Daily Retouch Him about a brother who one day you were out chopping down trees and you couldn't find the trees because of the woods, and you asked, you mentioned an idea to the brother that maybe someone could climb to the highest tree and give some direction to the woodcutters to cut the path. And all of these sessions that I've had with you, I've seen in that image that you've sort of climbed a tree for us during these sessions and pointed the way as we have sort of chopped down some trees, maybe some obstacles to prayer, and hopefully for those people who are with us, given them a little bit more of a possible path to experiencing God.
I hope so, yeah. And you know, our Lord said, freely have you received, freely give, and everything I have received has just been His free and loving gift through the community, and it's a joy to be able to share it, and I thank you for the opportunity to do that.
I agree with you totally. I've experienced in my own ministry in radio and TV that the more you do give to the people listening and watching, the more they will learn and give to someone else. And I try to close all of our programs with, please remember, God is blessing you every day in every way. Bless another.